Hey everybody, it's Leo from Life's Rolling On. Join me today as we check out my brand new 2026 R1300 GS BMW Adventure. Take it for a quick ride, sit down, talk about the likes and dislikes, also how I ordered it. Let's go. See you on the road. All right, sitting out at Lake Mead in Las Vegas, Nevada. Let's chat about how I ordered my 2026 BMW R1300. I did get the GS Adventure. I will talk about a quick episode coming up soon. I'm gonna basically explain why I switched from Harley Davidson to BMW. No ill will with the Harley brand or the bike. I've got tens of thousands of miles that I've loved on it, but I'll go in depth on that episode. However, let's talk about how I ordered this bike, and then that way the process, and if you guys have any details that you want me to be more descriptive or any questions, always leave them in the comments or reach out to me on social media or on our website, lifesrollingon.com. Anyways, check it out. So triple black, that was an $895 option. There's 4 color waves that come on that bike. You can pick between them. There's the standard white, there's the trophy, which we're used to seeing the red, white, and blue. There is the triple black, and there is the I believe the 719, that's the Karakoram, which is the green. I chose the black Storm Metallic, then the triple black add-on, which is $895. That adds the comfort passenger seat, aluminum fuel tank, which is basically brushed. You saw that. And comfort rider seat. What that means is it's got the heat switch in the rider, the pillion seat, and I added forged enduro wheels. The bike I rode in Europe had the cross spokes. Loved them. I like the look. For a brief minute, I thought I was going to do this one in gold spoke, but that being the case, I went with the forged wheel, and I love it. I like the way it looks, and I don't know if I can tell you I feel a difference, but I swear in corners, the more rigid wheel transfers energy different than the spoke wheel. That being said, if I was going down the enduro path with this, I'd absolutely run a spoke just because of the ability to fix spokes, and the wheel adapts to rocks and allows it to move a little better. That helps. Premium package add-on, so that was $3,275. And keep in mind, all this is in US denomination, as well as at the time we filmed this video. So this is 2026. These prices are subject to change, and I again reach out to BMW Motorrad for current pricing. That premium package for that additional money came with a chrome exhaust header pipe, electric windshield, ride mode pro, headlight pro, gear shift assist pro, riding assistant, sport brakes, the BMW sport brake system, GPS prep, and mount for aluminum side cases. That was all things that I were pretty much interested in. I'm not necessarily could care less about the chrome exhaust pipe. I'm going to change that to more than likely an Akrapovic header. I have an Akrapovic slip-on coming, or have it and just haven't put it on, and I might look at the Dr. Jekyll pipe as well. So selected other options. I paid for $294 for the top carrier. When you see the word top carrier, that does not mean the box. It means the carrier, to put a box. I have no intention of ever putting a box on that bike. I'm not being a smartass. To me, they look like pizza delivery boxes. But if you're a true adventure bike rider, and you know, function is far more important than looks, they work perfectly, especially the new BMW system, or like the Lone Rider or Tour Tech, or all the Vance brands, the aftermarket brands that seem to do fantastic with that. What I wanted was the ability to have power there, and I also wanted the ability to be able to take and hook things to it, like my Kriega bags or my SW Mototech Pro Rider Tail bag. That makes sense. Also, adaptive height control, we talked about that. That was a $625 charge. Allows it to raise and lower at low speeds, as well as I use it to help me assist on the center stand. I don't know if that's a dollar amount that equates to be important to you. It was for me. Also, keep in mind, when I ordered this, I sold my Harley. I don't want to say I made good money, but I made proper money, and then it allowed me to repurchase a proper, well-built BMW at my age, and with what I'm doing, and I ride constantly, and I like to ride a long distance. I wanted to have the best bike that I could afford. So some of these are not necessary. Use your own judgment when ordering. Any discounts available? Understand the dealer and manufacturer discount structure. Manufacturers put discounts on bikes when they can't move them. Dealers put discounts on bikes when they can't move them, or when the inventory is old. And the reason that's no different than cars, and we'll talk about an episode I will go through with strategy on how to buy a motorcycle. I'm not an expert at anything, but I've been around for a long time, bought a lot of cars, a lot of motorcycles in my life, and I worked in an automotive dealership, both selling cars, sales management, and service management, and service riding. So things that I can pass along to you, I will, and it's just strategy. But understand, there's a $1,000 BMW customer cash option available, and that was it. And that's not a lot. And I used this strategy of I had a very good down payment from selling my bike, and I sourced my own financing, and I always recommend that. Now, that being said, I do have good credit. If you have fantastic credit, and fantastic credit is typically 700 and above, you sometimes can take advantage of manufacturer zero interest. So I used a credit union. If you have a credit union, shop there. The reason you use interest, or the reason you source your financing before you typically go into one of these deals, is it helps you control the narrative of what's being negotiated. Because I knew BMW didn't have zero interest, and at the time the credit union had the best interest rate that I shopped all over, it was what made sense for me. So BMW did offer $1,000 if you were particularly on this. And how I found this is I went through BMW Motorrad site and looked at what offers were globally as well as nationally. And then I went in, because the dealer will typically not tell you those offers. So I use that to my advantage. And total as built, what you saw under walk around, this is USD, again, US denomination, $28,330. Plus sales tax and dealer fees. And dealer fees are negotiable, but there's a few of them that are set, and we'll talk about that in depth in a later episode. Some dealer add-ons that I included in the financing, but I used them in leverage for the sale. Just understand that. We'll go in depth later on a different episode. I got my left and right case. I thought that was funny. They call them hard case pannier cases. They're not sold as a pair. I imagine there's the mindset behind that is each one has a part number. In the event that you were to damage it, you could replace one. So when you order those, don't look at that price and think it's for two, it's for one. At the time of filming, they were $899 each in black. I'm not sure if the silver or lower cost. I'm gonna leave those part numbers down in the description. Again, do not count on those being accurate. Dealers and brands or OEMs, manufacturers change those as they make new ones. So just use it to help you source things online. So left and right case was $899 each. In the event you wanted a top case like we talked about before, that would be in black, $949. I did not buy that. And but I did buy the tank bag, and that tank bag has a fastening system that I thought was pretty important at the time, and it was quick. And however, that tank bag's obnoxiously priced. It's $519. I've seen on some internet venues that Ali has knockoff ones of them. It might behoove you to try that. I don't know what the quality is, and in my opinion, typically non-manufacturer items on Amazon or Ali can be very questionable at best on quality, but whatever fits in your budget is what you should worry about. And then also, I'd be interested if you have tried one to let us know. Maybe put them in the comments and recommend something, and that can be good or lower cost or higher, and it doesn't matter. But for me, I just did a whole episode on why I hate tank bags and why I love tail bags. So again, maybe you can chat it and let us know in the description what you like the best. The only reason I don't like tank bags is this bike in general, and I'll talk about this, very square, utilitarian, very military look, and I know people love that. I'm trying to make it look custom, and that's going to be what many episodes are going to be on, other than me going on rides and eating cool lunches and taking you with me. So let's talk about key differences. What's the difference in the 2025 R1300 GS Adventure versus the 26? It's a great question. I actually searched for that when I bought this bike, and couldn't find the answer very easily. Well, obviously, I also ordered before the 26s were ever released. I had the first 26 in Vegas, and let's talk a quick second. I'll jump back on this topic, but if you're gonna order times will vary depending on where you're at. Mine had a couple things that happened. I ordered this bike in July of 25. I got it in January of 26. Was it delayed? I don't know, but I know a few things happened in the world. Doesn't matter what your political affiliation, the world was crazy at the moment. There was tariffs being in place, and what those tariffs caused was right after I ordered my motorcycle per my dealer, and I'm only telling you what the dealer repeated to me. I don't know how accurate it is, but when the tariffs became in place, BMW, the cost of aluminum and steel to build this motorcycle was so high that they were not going to order new motorcycles. They were just going to ship what was predetermined to go to those dealers. So I don't know if that had changed, but that very well could have changed the timeline in mine. Second, there was 2025 bikes already coming across the water on container ships, and then there was issues with customs with the political climate. So all of those things aren't any major issue in itself, but they all turn into something when you stack them up. So BMW did provide a tracking number to the dealer, and that was done after the production date. So I was made aware of when the production date hit. And I had a fantastic dealer experience. I purchased my bike through Eurocycle. We'll talk about that in another episode, but just a few things. They do give you a date, then that date turns into a container number, and then that container gets on the ship, and then when it gets to the US in this particular case, that stops the tracking, because as it makes itself through customs, then a third-party truck transport company picks it up, and then it makes stops all along the way from East Coast to the West Coast, dropping off new models, whether they're BMW or other brands. So mine took a nice journey for weeks as it came across the bay, and then as far as it Same thing on the truck transport. So I'll go in more detail of that on that other episode, but just interesting to know. So it took 6 months. So what are those key differences? We talked about key differences between the 2025 model and 2026 model. Very little. Most of it's cosmetic. Almost none of it is hard parts. So the 26 models introduced a new color scheme, which is a really cool flat white color. Trophy is in a matte aluminum white racing with blue, and racing red option is new for 2026. So that equipment upgrades. Touring package now officially includes the handguard extensions on the walk-around. We saw the handguards. That is part of it in the U.S. The blinkers are not in the front nose or the beak. They are in the handguards. The rear turn signals in the U.S. are hideous. Navigation electronics this year, the 26 model introduces a new nav prep system that allows for electric unlocking, removing the need to unlock the device traditionally with the old school key. Service on the 26 models, as we chatted about, is the Ultimate Care Break-In service. That 600-mile initial service is now included with the purchase. What remains the same? The core bike, the mechanical portion of the bike, the frame, the layout, the rake and trail, all the actual functioning parts of the bike are exactly the same. All right, I wanted to talk about a couple things on the bike that are commonly found in forums and people online trying to find out what the difference between the two is. Electronic suspension, DSA adjustment. So dynamic suspension adjustment, there's that. And we'll talk about the key difference between dynamic suspension. So basically DSA manages, and I am reading, DSA manages the load compensation and dampening and spring stiffness in real time. So while you're on the bike, when you saw in the corners, and I cycled through road, I cycled through dynamic, the bike's ability to compress. So you have compression and rebound on your spring rates and in your valving. So DSA allows, if you were to pack heavy the bike or you had two up riders and you're coming into a corner, DSA will sense these things and firm up the suspension. You can feel it on the bike. You can feel it as a single rider, performance oriented as you cycle through. When I had it on Dynamic Pro, and obviously there's different levels you can set Dynamic Pro at, but Dynamic Pro is far more stiff and firm than it would be on road. Road provides a smoother, more comfortable ride. So there's a few things happening. There's your everyday ride, as well as potholes, bumps, how you feel in your body, how you felt in the bars, and then you have performance and as far as bike being weighted down. So you saw as I would come into some corners that if I was on dynamic, it would plant and stay, where on road it was more comfortable coming through the bumps, but it would float a little bit in the corners. None of it was uncontrollable. I could do almost any speed, one hand, two hand, whatever I needed on that road that we rode to this point. It's all in how you like to ride. Now, that being said, if I was gonna go do, spirited riding, it was gonna be on the gas and hammering corners, I'd want it to be far more firm and obviously planted. So that's one way to look at it. So we talked about that. Functionality of DSA versus load compensation. So as you pack the bike, you add more in the hard bags, you add anything in rear racks or additional gear or dry packs. The more weight you put on that bike, it changes how the bike is going to handle. It also changes on how it's going to ride in and control in its lane. So DSA is all functioning through the computer and continually making improvements and or changes as you ride. So absolutely an excellent feature on the BMW. I'm very happy with it. Let's talk about the counterpart that always gets misunderstood, adaptive vehicle height. So for a brief minute, I showed you on my screen at the very bottom of the TFT screen, there is a simulation of a motorcycle and there's an arrow whether it is up or it's facing down. So adaptive vehicle height is basically, it allows you, depending on your inseam, I am 6 foot tall, I have a 32-foot inseam, 6 foot tall, 32-inch inseam. That is imperial measurements. I don't know what the metric is. That allows you, as you come into a stoplight or slow down, you will watch the bike shift from raising for performance to lowering to allow you to sit flat-footed at a light and be safe and comfortable, which is awesome. When you pull away and you start to click up through gears and pick up speed, the bike will at that point raise up. A lot of people don't understand, why would it raise up? It would not make sense. I'll explain. I'm by no means a suspension engineer, but I will tell you on my previous motorcycle, and I talk a lot about my Harley Road Glide, One of the performance suspension or performance enhancements we made on that bike was performance suspension. There was a couple different outstanding brands out there: Öhlins, Legends, Race Tech. There's a lot of different options available, but a lot of people went to a taller suspension, and there's twofold. One, more ground clearance. So as you come through corners, and BMWs, if you've ever watched, YouTube or a lot of social media, you'll see guys on, especially on these boxer engines or GSAs, that can come through at 44, 43 degree lean angle, and that is no joke. That is fantastic. And if you can do that, man, that is a feeling you'll never forget. And I'm constantly working on that. But being said, if you don't have the ride height, the lower you are, the more you're going to drag. So you constantly hear a lot of Harley guys talking about dragging pegs. Well, that's because they don't have enough clearance. So if your pegs are lower to keep your center of gravity in a certain place or lower, and then you lean the bike over notably 35 plus degrees, 30 degrees, depending on the bike, you can tend to drag things like your bags and or your pegs. Where that, it's a novelty to some, but where it becomes a problem, and there's an internet video floating around on a guy on a road glide who's making a left-hand sweep, and the bag hits the ground, and then the transfer of energy happens, and basically the rebound comes up on the bike because the bag hit and unweights the rear end of the bike in the corner and ejects the rider, and I understand, got pretty hurt. That's why that's important. You want that to lift, and in corners it allows you to get the clearance, lean it over, and as well as just have a more overall safe aspect of ground clearance. So I hope that that kind of makes sense. So remember, DSA is a onboard continuous improvement for both your suspension and your weight capability. And then adaptive vehicle height is a different fundamental. It allows the bike to raise and lower at slow speeds. All right, a quick takeaway between DSA and adaptive vehicle height. Just remember this: DSA is active suspension. It's standard on some models like the R1300 GS that handles basically the feel of the ride and the suspension and dynamics of the weight. Adaptive vehicle height control is an optional feature that does not come standard. You have to source it or pay for it. That manages the physical position of the bike at slow speeds and will allow it to raise and control or raise height or lower height depending on the DSA controller. Hope that helps. Let's wrap it up. Let's talk about rider likes and rider dislikes. So we rode the bike up North Shore and back, and let's talk about what do we like. This is just my personal opinion. This is not the brand, and this is definitely not an accumulated, like I didn't ask riders. This is just my first impression. So keep in mind, I rode this bike for about 4,000 kilometers in Europe, and then I've ridden it here now roughly about 3-4 weekends and got some time on it, and I'll sum it up. I love it. It is maybe the most fun motorcycle I've ever ridden in my life, and that is from dirt bikes to Harleys to sport bikes. It is just fantastic. Now that being said, kind of ugly. So I joke if you I have a mission, and I have a bunch of episodes coming about I'm going to try to make this bike cooler than it is, and I'm going to do so with aftermarket parts. But I am so used to the brand, Harley, and the full customization and the brand being behind the customizing, and you buy a Harley you buy a lifestyle, and nobody's ever said those Harleys were the best bikes ever built. Far from it. These BMWs, this bike is so much fun to ride, and it's all done in geometry and mechanical setup. Now, that being said, there's a couple great aftermarket builders. I have learned that far more of the majority of them over in Europe and France that are customizing these, and I love it, and it's inspired me to keep doing cool things, and that's going to start. As a matter of fact, I'm going to ride home today, and I'm going to yank all the things off that need to be powder coated because the colors are wrong, and we'll start with that, and we're going to make that an episode. But that being said, let's talk about rider likes. Exceptionally fun to ride. The most fun motorcycle I've ever ridden, hands down. Handles like a sports bike, looks like a tank. The bike, it has, I believe 593 pounds was the weight. It does not handle like that. You feel that slightly when you're getting it off the kickstand, but I will tell you, as soon as the bike is underway, it is super nimble, and it is so fun to ride. It handles like a dream. I wish I can put this bike anywhere on the road, and during the ride portion I had actually mentioned, there was a few times when there was potholes, there was road snakes with the tar, there was cracks in the road, and it doesn't matter when or where I was in a corner, I can move that bike anywhere I wanted it to be, and it would hold. Fantastic. Let's talk about rider ergonomics. Maybe again, one of the most comfortable bikes I've ever ridden. The rider, so-called triangle. That is where your feet go to correlation to where you sit, to where your hands and your body turns into what would look like triangle. It is so comfortable. The very first time I rode this bike home from the dealer, I rode almost 600 miles the first weekend and with no intent. I just didn't want to get off of it. I left Vegas and I rode to Parker, Arizona, and then I purposely found the longest way back I could. It's just phenomenal. I love how this bike feels. I like, there's some people that in the internet that have mentioned that they don't like the hydraulic clutch. I am an absolute avid fan of hydraulic clutches. I don't like cable clutches. I think the hydraulic clutch on this bike is fantastic. I think so far the transmission's been fantastic. The only thing that I will tell you is in dynamic, and I haven't tested it in every mode, when you are fully on the throttle and you are going from first to second, it wants to hit the rev limiter. And that's pretty interesting. And if you're not sure that's going to happen, it's eye-opening. I am going to try to find out in Dynamic Pro if I can move that rev limiter shift point. And I'm used to my built Harley motor where I could just completely hold it wide open through the gears and it would never do that. So I got to look into that, but I'll let you know when I learn how to do that. I will make a video showing how to do that. But again, keep in mind you want to protect your motorcycle and your warranty, but yeah, that's a goofy thing for me. But I do love how great the hydraulic clutch is and how well it does shift. Great suspension out of the box. The paralever and the telelever front and rear suspension it handles. I am a trail breaker. I almost never use rear brake ever. I set my front end with my front brake and it will set and hold it. It doesn't dip and float. It doesn't want to bounce. Fantastic. I've never owned a motorcycle that has both forks and a shock on the front end. It seems like it's too many moving parts, but I will tell you it works fantastic. To me, suspension's fantastic. Braking. Now the bike does have the upgraded sport braking. I am going to put aftermarket braking rotors on it and pads. I am a huge advocate of putting as much money in your brakes as you can. Brakes are fantastic choices for aftermarket upgrades, but these stock brakes are amazing. They're Brembo calipers. Only thing I wish is they weren't so unattractive. I don't like the block look of those monoblock calipers and the cheap looking BMW logo that's not even really a BMW logo. So at some point I'm going to redo the brakes. I'm going to recolor the calipers and then give it a proper Brembo logo, but the functionality of the brake is fantastic. All right, what else? So surprising agility, despite the 593 pounds of curb weight, and that weight is loaded with fuel and oil, not person or pack, but man, for that thing being just such a tank, it is so nimble like we talked about on the road. The weight disappears when it's rolling. The rolling bike is so nimble and finite adjustment-wise, it's incredible. Let's talk about the range. That 7.9 gallon tank is fantastic. There was many times I got in the habit on the Harley of riding gas station to gas station, 150 to 200 miles, and not because I was sore. It's easy to just use the restroom, but for the most part, if you've got a guy on a Dyna and you got a guy on a Road Glide, that way everybody can fuel at the same time. And it works out when you're going 1,000 miles, every 200 miles you stop. But I will tell you, this 7.9 gallon tank or 30 liters, I mean, the range is 300 to 400 miles, depending on speed and how heavy you're packed. I do like the adaptive height control. We talked about that earlier in depth. I like being able to come up, the bike lowers itself. I can sit flat-footed, or I don't mind being on my toes, but I can sit flat-footed, no problem. Plus it helps me get it on the main center stand. Engine performance. One of the things of getting off the Harley I was worried about is Harleys have great torque and up to 3,000 to 5,000 RPMs, the most fun sweet spot to ride in. Man, this Boxer engine is so unbelievable with the spread of torque, 110 foot-pounds of torque. As far as speed, it is governed. It's 120 mile an hour plus motor. I am going to use and get my bike tuned. When I was in Europe, I could tell you this, I had buddies who were on CVO Harleys that were outstanding riders. I mean, some of the best riders I've ever ridden with are a few of the friends that I went to Europe with repeatedly, and I will tell you, I could at any time reel them in and knock on the door as much as I wanted. I could stick the tire anywhere I needed in the corner. I could remind them that I was there, and I could more than likely pull away if need be, and it was just always on deck for power. That's not making me the greatest rider. I'd like to believe we're pretty paired, but honestly, it was the bike. So the power on that boxer engine's great. Now, obviously, there is certain things when you do tune it that will negate your warranty, so look into that and be ready to understand that that might void your warranty if you chose that path. But basically, almost vibration free. I can run for hours. I don't feel it in my hands. That 1300cc boxer motor is fantastic. So big fan of it. And touring comfort. Overall, the wind protection, being able to stand up on the pegs, again, the vibration, almost no vibration. I can do relentless miles on this thing and then feel like $1 million. Like I don't need to go to the hotel and get in a hot tub and or crash because I'm exhausted. I can't wait. I'm gonna ride to Zion soon and then I go back through Flagstaff and make the loop. I can't wait because the bike is so comfortable to ride. I want to just keep going. So those are the things that I like. Let's talk about the small list of dislike things, because it would not be an honest review. And one thing I'm gonna do is always tell you the truth about how I feel about these things. Sometimes my enthusiasm outweighs the negative, so bear with me. I'll tell you when I'm just super happy. I'm not thrilled with the industrial look. Honestly, I've said it before. The big militant look, the 1250 GS Adventure looked far better than the 1300. I knew this going into it, but all the other things outweighed it. Getting to just a regular 1300 normal GS, super good looking bike. The 1250 Adventure, great looking bike, maybe one of the best bikes ever. Not my bike, but I did ride a ASA model, and it's just not for me. Gull wings, the new automatic transmissions, the functional side of things were pretty amazing, honestly, because the magic clutch. I'm not criticizing BMW or the functionality of it, and if you have an ASA bike, please let me know in the comments what you think, if you love it. And the reason I ask is other people might be considering that are watching this, so don't not buy it because of me. I want you to go down and test ride it at the dealership and try it, and then take other viewers' comments to heart. The reason I love my clutch, I said it earlier, I like my hydraulic clutch. I use my clutch to clutch in and out of corners sometimes, and I use it to manage slow speed riding. I'm in my mid 50s and I started riding when I was 4, so we can do that internet math together. But I'll tell you, I've been riding most of my life, and most of my bikes have had a clutch, and I use the clutch all the time and I enjoy it. So it's not a negative, I just don't want that at this time in my life. Low speed heft, we talked about. Once the bike's up and running, it is as nimble as it can be. The factory kickstand, I would like to just unbolt and throw it away. I am going to switch that out very quick. I've already got it at the house. We're gonna do an episode on that. Keep in mind, people sell the extended foot. If that's an affordability option for you, get that. That's definitely helps. I'm gonna use an alt-rider longer kickstand. I already have that. That is an episode in itself, because ordering that kickstand is dependent on what kickstand system your bike was shipped with. BMW's Enduro kickstand is longer. You can order that from BMW, but that's dependent as well on what system's on your bike. So there is a resolve for it. Trying to lift that bike up full of fuel, full heavy bags, and when you're tired and on a negative camber is difficult. So the fix is getting the proper kickstand or the lift, as well as making sure you're aware to park that bike on the uphill side of things, so you're using gravity to help you. There's also a trick. When you have the bars turned, it's harder to right a bike up than it is if the bars are straight. If the tire is straight, it will right itself far easier as you roll it than if the tire is turned to the left. It doesn't want to lift as easy. So all things that we'll do a video about that. And other than that, I got to tell you, I had to figure those things out to tell you, because honestly, my joy of how much fun the bike is to ride, I probably wouldn't be able to remember anything that was wrong with it. So I hope you take all those things for what they are. I hope you enjoyed the walk around. I highly encourage you to go take this bike for a test drive from your dealer if it's something you're considering. Or if you head out in the wild and you're riding and you see somebody on an adventure, maybe pull over, and if you guys get a chance to talk, ask the rider and see what they think and see if it mimics or simulates anything that I'm talking about, if they're having the same. And other than that, let's talk about the most important. Thank you very much for watching today. I am so thankful that you're here, and check back next time, and more importantly, go ride motorcycles. Life's rolling on. Thanks.